And we are live. Thank you everyone for tuning in to the Nightmare Press podcast. My guest today is Gevera. Is that right? Bert
Gevera
Piedmont.
Bert Piedmont. You can just call
Gevera
me
Bert.
Bert.
Call her Bert. So
Call me Bert.
she is an author of the upcoming release we have for Nightmare Press called Fat Monster, and she's works with the HWA. She has done art. She has written nonfiction. She's done a lot of different things, so we'll talk about that. But let's go ahead. Just tell us a little bit about Fat Monster, the book that's set to come out soon.
Well, Fat Monster came about when I was playing Call of Cthulhu, and in Masks and Arlahotep, when you're in Peru, there's these fat sucking monsters, and I just all of a sudden was like, "Oh my God, fat sucking monsters! This is awesome!" And I just wrote something on a napkin, and I saved that napkin, and I was just like, "How much would um like Americans worship a monster that ate fat, right?" And then that was
Mhm.
my napkin. And then I just started like revising that. And then I started thinking about like a multi-level marketing company that was run by those monsters, like preying on fat people to draw them in and eat their fat, like to get them all together. And that just seemed like so perfect. So I created a whole multi-level marketing company, which all the layers of it are in the book. And and then I, came up with the characters who would be enmeshed in this company, and you know, the typical experience you get from being in a multi-level marketing company, which is horrible, and you lose your money and you get preyed on and you prey upon other people. So there's that level. And there's also the level of you're fat and you're being preyed on by society because society doesn't like fat people. And then the whole thing where, oh my God, like there's monsters actually eating some of the people in this MLM. So, there's a lot of layers to it. So I just hope that when you read it, you succeed in seeing what I was trying to do, and you don't just look at it and say, "Oh my God, this is a mess." Um, I know that I look skinny now, and I am, but I used to weigh almost 400 pounds. So Becca's experience and Leela's experience are lived experiences for me. Um, of being fat, of how people treat you in public, of things people say. There are small things in that book that literally happened to me. So, yeah. So it's not like, oh, that skinny bitch wrote a book about fat people. What does he know? Oh, I know. Oh, I know a lot. Um, So, and everybody that I've talked to about it, I've been really talking it up when I've been doing events the past few weeks and showing them the little preliminary cover on my phone. And there's people who've just looked at the cover on my phone and been like, I don't even know what that's about. I just want it because it's purple, which and shiny. So, so yeah, I just hope that people love it as much as I do. I actually wrote it as a NaNoWriMo thing, so I wrote that in 30 days.
Yeah, I was when you submitted it to Nightmare Press, and I was reading through it a little bit and reading your submission. I was like, I really like this. This is very multi. Like, it's got obviously Lovecraftian issues, influence on it. And I was like, and it speaks about two different problems in our society: the multi-level marketing schemes, and also the mistreatment of overweight people. And plus, the kind of the title itself is kind of like a play on words, like fat monster. It's like, oh, that's how the main character feels. People look at her, but at
Yep.
the same time, there's actually fat monsters, fat sucking monsters and that sort of thing
Yep.
in the book. And I thought
Yeah,
it's
that's
just,
exactly what it is.
and I was like, this is just really good. I like this, and I wish I would have already had it out by now, but but it seems like, okay, so you're the first person to get a comment on our show. Apparently, you have a fan watching, Jessica Lucci. She says
Oh, yep.
One of my favorite authors. Hooray.
She's a friend of mine, and she's also an author.
Okay, cool.
So
Y'all write pretty much the same type of stuff, kind of.
absolutely not. She writes steampunk.
Oh, cool. Well, that's cool too.
She's an author from Boston. She writes steampunk. She lives about 3 hours from me.
So y'all kind of lean on each other and cry on each other's
Yeah,
shoulders about how horrible trying to write a book can be.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so it's. I'll go ahead and ask this question early. I usually wait till later in the show. So, since it was a lot of learned experience for you in Fat Monster, how important do you think it is that people kind of write what they know, and if they try to write something new, that they actually go out and experience this new thing they're trying to write about? How do
Well,
you weigh those?
you can't experience everything. I
Right.
mean, if you only write what you know, it's going to get boring after a while. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a lot of things that I don't know. I mean, Leela is a 6 foot tall androgynous black woman. See this face? I'm
Yeah.
5'4", very white. So
Hmm.
clearly, I did not live her experience. However, I have bisexual friends. I have friends who are very tall women. I have friends who are very androgynous. I have friends who are not white. So I was able to draw on my friends' experiences and
It's kind
pull
of the
all of that
secondhand
together.
experience.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, you do have to venture out a little, but I don't think that you can be like, I'm going to write a character that has absolutely nothing to do with me. You have to put a little bit of yourself in all your characters. And
I agree.
there's a little bit of me in Leela, of course. There's a little bit of me in Dr. Lee, and he is a crazy mad scientist because that's what you do. You splinter yourself apart, and all your parts argue and have conversations, and then you write a book about it and say, I'm not schizophrenic. I don't have anything.
It's like I'm not
There's nothing
schizophrenic.
wrong
I'm
with
just a
me.
writer. Yeah, that's some arguments that I've gotten. I've basically made the same argument you just did at times, and people will say, well, not everybody writes themselves as the main character in their book, and I'm like, it's not writing yourself. It's kind of like you can't get away from writing pieces of you into every character, even if you despise the character and they're supposed to be a bad guy. There's just it's coming from your mind.
Right.
So oh, he's going to be, but you got to be smart enough to kind of like, okay, this isn't me, but this is like where it comes from.
Or it's the me I used to be. It's the me I want to be. Um, It's somebody I knew 10 years ago mixed
Yep.
with somebody I saw on the bus. I mean, it's basically you're taking all of these different people that you've ever known, and you're just putting them in a blender.
Yeah.
There's
Hmm.
people you've known and people you've never known and people you've wished you've known, and that's where characters come from. And
Yep.
sometimes you go online and you look at a character generator and you throw it in there, and then you're like, "Oh, yeah, look at that." And then you riff off of that, which actually that's my next project, is making something like that. Um, so, eh, you know, you can't I don't think you can write and not have yourself. I mean, is a lot of me in Becca? Yes, but there's a lot of Becca that's not me at all. I don't
Hmm.
have a rich and famous mother who refuses to speak to me. My mother was a normal lady who is dead. So I have no experience with, I have a lot of friends like who have famous, very famous relatives, but I don't have any famous relatives. So yeah, that's something that is totally not me that I gave to Becca that I don't have. So yeah, me and
Yeah.
Becca were, yeah, she could be like my cousin.
Yeah. And I think that's the secondhand experience that you touched on is what I try to, explain that I'm talking about to people, and they just don't get it. Cause you can, like, well, some people do, but then it's like, cause if you're going to write a character who's obviously not from your walk of life, it's going to show if you have no experience. And by experience, meaning knowing people who have walked that life. And I feel like there's a lot of people who are trying to try to shoehorn characters and stuff in books, and they don't know anything about their characters, and I think it shows, and I think it's important that they get out and, if they want to do that, to know people, you know.
Yeah,
Jessica
and I do
Lucci.
try to,
I'm
and
sorry.
I do try to have, you know, a representation of various characters. I try to put characters that aren't pure white, and I try to have characters that aren't straight in my books as much as possible, but it's hard to make them the main character because, again, I'm not that.
Right.
You know, sometimes I'll make those characters be a point of view character, but not usually like the protagonist.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Um, Jessica Lucci says Bert is an inspiration.
She loves
So
me.
yeah, apparently. Hey, like I said, you're the first person. This is episode 14, I think, and you're the first person to ever get a comment. So good job. Um, so all right, so the deep ones. You obviously like the deep ones quite a bit. So where did I didn't even I've heard of Lovecraft, but I didn't even start reading him until like 2020, and I was blown away. I was like, I'd never read this guy before. Why haven't I? He was fantastic. So what
Yeah,
made
there's something about Shadow over Innsmouth. I know the Shadow over Innsmouth was actually written to be about like prejudice and race mixing and to be a really negative story, but there's something
Mhm.
about it for me that goes in a very different direction. And I actually made a t-shirt that has the line from the end about, we're going to go down to Jan Nifley and dwell in the home of the deep ones forever, because to me that's beautiful and freeing. But for Lovecraft, that was horrifying because it was race mixing and these people were ugly, and his character found out he was one of them, and that was the worst thing that could happen. And I think it's beautiful. And if you know me, people buy me mermaid things because I'm a mermaid. I have a hot tub in my house and a pool in my yard, and I am in the water every day. Bert the mermaid, Bert the deep one. So, I don't see deep ones, unfortunately, as monsters, which is probably a problem because, they have big nasty teeth and
I
everything.
mean,
But
I'm kind of with you on that. I don't really see them as that either. They're just super powerful beings. I mean,
yeah, and
we view things differently. I'm sure chickens see us as monsters. So I mean,
so I mean, I did a anthology last year called Necronama Romcom, and one of the stories that I took was, several of the stories I took were like, romances with deep ones. And every time one came in and I would tell my husband about it, he would just roll his eyes and go, "Does that person know you?" And I'm like, "No, they're a total stranger." And he's like, "But you're going to take it because it's deep ones, right?"
yeah.
So, yeah. Um, and the whole point of Necronama Romcom was people falling in love with monsters. It was Lovecraftian monsters and people loving them in some very weird ways. So, yeah, it's really hard for me to see monsters as monsters. And that could be my head is not wired like other people. It could have something to do with that. Or maybe I'm a monster. I don't know. I don't know.
No, I think no, I agree with you. The funny part is about Lovecraft. As I mentioned, I hadn't read him much before, so it was like before I'd actually read him, I was kind of like, why are people always writing, playing in his sandbox, writing his stuff? Why don't they write their own stuff? And it's funny, I go on and this is worked into my most recent book, Hearts and Hourglass, but because H.P. Lovecraft's actually a character in that book at one point, but so like after I read him, and I was like, okay, now I know why people do it. This guy, his work is essentially the foundation of what we know now as like horror and the at least the supernatural kind, dark fantasy, and all that. And so, yeah, it became like I understood like he's he was it. He was the the guy who basically started it for everybody.
Right. And the fact is that even when he was alive, he let other writers play in his sandbox.
Mhm.
You know, he allowed that. So it's not like, oh, it's a copyright violation or whatever, because
Well, it's not anyway. It's public domain now, I
well,
think. So,
but he was very open to it. You just have to be careful about other people who've played in his sandbox and come up with new things.
yeah,
Since he died, you can't use those things. So
right.
there's kind of
It's
a
like Dracula.
continuum.
It's kind of like the Dracula mythos. You have to be careful of what Dracula you're using. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I definitely agree. Since Douglas Yeager says, I second Jessica Lucci.
Yep, I know Doug too.
You're bringing out a fan base, which is a good thing. So we were talking about you talking about Lovecraft. We are talking about his work, and you mentioned that his beliefs weren't great; they were pretty bad. So, and we're not going to go into that, obviously. But I mean, like the separate art from artist thing is a big argument people have, and I've seen that people go back and forth. And he's been, of course, Rowling and H.P. Lovecraft are the two biggest ones who get mentioned. So, what's your opinion on separating art from the artist?
Okay, Harry Potter, she's still alive. So I no longer support Harry Potter because she is still alive and making money, and she is reprehensible to me now.
Mhm.
Lovecraft is long dead. Part of his things were a product of his time, and part of his things were he was a nasty man. Um, but he's dead. He can't make money anymore. Um, Rowling can still make money. So no, I can't support her. I enjoyed her stuff kind of before I knew. I think she's a good storyteller and not a great writer.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Um, and it's just, oh, okay, I don't agree with, if she just said a few things and moved on, but she's drills into it. She
She's
won't
really
shut
taking it
up
to
about
another.
it.
Yeah,
And
that
I'm
was kind
like,
of like me when I
"Ye-
first heard. Like when I didn't even know about that stuff for years. I didn't even know she did it till a couple years after, I suppose. But it's like her initial stuff. It's like, yeah, her initial stuff. You could have looked past that, but she just kind of took it to a whole other level after. Sorry, and I think she did it because as a reaction to probably getting mad about all the stuff people. But it's like really though, when you do that, you're still just giving in and just saying, hey, I'm just going to give in to being hateful. And it's like, why would you want to do that?
I mean, there's probably people, I mean, I know for a fact there's people who think my views are hateful because I'm left wing and pagan and whatever. And okay, that's fine. Just there's the door. Um, I don't make any secret of my beliefs, so it's not like she came from behind with this hatred.
Right. Yeah.
I've been out here as what I am forever. It's not like a secret how
Right.
I what I think about. It's right in my books. My beliefs are right in my books. I don't try to hide it. So,
And here's
um,
a I once posed a question too, like the one you said about her still being alive and him being dead. So this is one question, and when I asked this question, I really just wanted people to have a conversation about it. Instead, I just got attacked. But um, okay, so yes, Lovecraft is dead and he can't collect any money. But I was like, so what do you say about we're still supporting his legacy, keeping his legacy alive. So as long as his legacy is alive, people are gonna find out about his beliefs. Therefore, his beliefs are still kind of kept alive. How how would you respond to that?
right. But, you know, you say, okay, Lovecraft wrote these stories and they were great. But if you look at his personal beliefs, they were terrible. So focus on his stories. Don't focus on what he thought about otherwise. Don't look up the name of his cat.
Yeah. And that's and again that's a good point because he's dead. His beliefs are not going to go any like he's not going to add anything to his beliefs.
Right.
Someone who's still alive like J.K. Rowling, you can't just say, well, same difference because she could just no telling what the hell she'll say tomorrow, right? And it can maybe even worse and even more hateful. So I think that's a very
Yeah.
good answer.
Yeah.
Plus,
And I
what?
mean, I hate to, I hate to pick on people for their beliefs because I have been picked on for my beliefs. So I get the hurt of that. But if you just keep doubling down after people are like, don't say that. And, and you're a billionaire and people are like, you're on that soapbox. The more money you have, the higher your soapbox is and the more people hear you. So you're now
Yeah.
making that choice.
Yeah, the
Nobody
doubling down is
hears
definitely not okay.
nobody hears me when I talk, unfortunately.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm trying. I'm trying. I got 300 followers on Blue Sky. You know, anything I say is not an explosion.
Hey, Nightmare Press has like 40 something followers on Blue Sky, so so I don't feel bad. I don't really use Blue Sky though. I don't much care for it. Um, oh, okay, so yeah, and I would definitely agree. Like there is a big difference, and plus, like with Lovecraft too, I've heard this story. I don't know much about his life per se, but there have been people that said that he was very sheltered, and that's part of why he believed what he believed because those were the beliefs of people around him. And also, like some people said that he started to change his stance on that as he got older or something. I don't know if that's true. Do you know
He
anything about
married
that?
a Jewish woman.
I did hear about that. Yeah.
His
So
wife
obviously,
Sonia was Jewish. Yeah.
so that's at
So
least, yeah. Sometimes because you got to think back then in his time, they were very, I mean, they really were very secluded. I mean, there wasn't telephones, there wasn't television, there wasn't social media. So if you got some people telling you this group of people are horrible, then what do you have, and to contrast that? And that could be why he felt that way. But he could have just been a nasty individual too. He could have just been a hateful person. So who knows? Now you said something earlier a second ago about just writing the same thing over and over. Now that's like if you don't try something new. I've noticed that's been a complaint I've seen some people say about Stephen King. Always, all of his characters always being writers. What do you what do you think about that?
he writes a lot of writers. He used to write a lot of children.
Yeah.
In the beginning when he had kids, in the 70s. I'm not as much into him as I used to be. I mean, if that's his thing, that's his thing. He wants to write about writers. He's a
Yeah.
writer. That's what he knows. I perhaps am a velociraptor, and that's what I know.
Right.
I mean, in a
I feel like
velociraptor in a bird suit.
I feel like writing about writers also makes it easy because it frees up the character's time so they can you're not as limited with what they're doing. If they work a 9 to 5 job, you got to set what happens to them at certain times of the day. When you got a writer, they're a lot more wide open for experiences. So I think that has a lot to do with it. That kind of works. So outside of Fat Monster, tell us about some of your other works.
Well, I already told you about Necronoma Rom-Com, which
Mm-hmm.
was the anthology I put out last year. I put out another anthology last year called Horror with the Handlebars with my friend John, and that's all stories set in Connecticut by mostly by local authors. They're set in the 80s and 90s, and they're kind of the coming of age kids on bikes, kind of like Stranger Things kind of genre. That's a lot of fun. Um, I have a trilogy of novels about a character called Mickey Crow, who's very mysterious. She may or may not be a Native American, and she may or may not be from this planet. And so she is a paranormal investigator, and just somehow when she goes out to do her paranormal investigating, she always finds an actual monster. So in the first book, her and her friends find a shiver of mer sharks. And I don't know if you know that a group of sharks is called a shiver. And the book is called Shiver. And in the second book, they go to a virtual reality amusement park, and there is a Shoggoth there, in disguise, eating people. And in the third one, they go to see their friends who have a battle bot, but I can't call it a battle bot, obviously.
Yeah.
And it fights against a different kind of robot, kind of like those dogs in that episode of Black Mirror. So if you so that's what it's about. It's BattleBots versus those dogs, except the dogs look like spiders. And that's called Metal. And then I have an omnibus of the 3 of them called Murder One. And there's a bonus short story in there about a really cool ghost. And then I have another novel that I wrote a really long time ago with my friend Carol that is Harry Potter meets 50 Shades of Grey meets Walking Dead if Terry Pratchett wrote it. And my friend Carol is an actual zombie, so it may be the only zombie
Well,
book written by a zombie.
well, that's definitely a selling point. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's the one the cover is a really cool photograph that Carol and I took. So yeah. And then and I have the Maw and Other Time Traveling Lizard Tales, which is where I started my teacup velociraptor journey. It's all related short stories about time traveling lizards, velociraptors, Aztecs, mermaids, pirates. There's a steampunk story in there, so that's a lot of fun. And eventually there'll be a second one that collects all the stories I've written since then, but all my stories take place in the time traveling lizard world.
Yeah, I like that you use a lot of different things. Like I appreciate that because as a reader and like with movies too, but like with stories, I really like when people put a whole bunch of different things into one story, and I think that I find that to be. I don't know. Maybe it's because I could possibly have ADHD. I don't know, but I enjoy a wide variety of activity going on. So I think that's really cool. And speaking of lizards and dinosaurs, you are an animal lover, and lizards and dinosaurs are among your favorite your favorite animals, apparently. So
And
tell us a
kitties.
little
Here's
bit.
my kitty.
Oh yeah, and you said he's 18 years old, right?
He is 18 years old. He's my baby. Come on, sit. Sit. Thank you. He's not gonna sit. So I've always liked dinosaurs. When I was little, I wanted to be a paleontologist when I grew up. I remember one time in school, they said to write down what you wanted to be doing in the year 2000, which seemed so far away. And I said, I want to be, I know, and now it was 25 years ago, but it was like 25 years in the future at that point. I said that I wanted to be digging up a new dinosaur, naming it after myself. So that's what I wanted to be doing. That is not what I was doing, but I was probably writing a story about one. So yeah, I wanted to be a paleontologist, and I even worked for a summer at the Yale Peabody Museum in New Haven. I carried around this dinosaur femur. I can't put my hands out far enough that you could see, but it was like this cast of a dinosaur femur that everybody could touch. It was when Jurassic Park came out. So everybody would like come to see the dinosaurs every Sunday, and that was what I did on Sunday. I carried this femur around and let everyone touch it. It was so cool. Yeah. And the time traveling lizards, I thought the time traveling lizards started when I wrote The Maw, but then I was looking back at Ayersford, which is narrated by a lizard named Khan, and I realized that Khan was actually the first time traveling lizard. So that's how long ago I started writing about time traveling lizards, which was I don't actually know when Carol and I started writing that, but I think it came out in 2011. So I've been writing about them for a while, and they have little jewels in their forehead, and yeah. So there's basically, it's a multiverse. So like Fat Monster, for instance, is set in a slightly askew version of our world where there's pyramids in New Haven, because why not? And people are
Right.
running around worshiping Egyptian and Aztec gods in New Haven, because that's the New Haven I want. I don't like the New Haven. I was just there on Sunday. It's fine, but it could be better. And if it had some pyramids and like people worshiping like Bast, so much better. So I
Yeah,
create the world that I want.
the Egyptian gods, they're pretty interesting. The Aztec gods are interesting.
Yeah. And the nonfiction that I wrote was actually I wrote I don't even remember, late 90s, early 2000s, I wrote a big fat book about the Aztec Mayan calendar, which I have to rewrite because part of it's out of date now. So I just have to go through and update it. And I also created a oracle deck called the Desert Divination deck, which is based on their 260-day calendar. And I have another oracle deck that's a Lenormand deck, and then I have a mermaid affirmation deck that I made. My spare time, I just make whole decks of cards that no one ever buys. Though I sold a lot of them on Sunday, so that was nice.
So are you into like a lot? You've already mentioned the paranormal in that one story, and you're talking about the oracle cards. So I take it you're into the metaphysical and the divination and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I collect Cthulhu like tarot decks and stuff. So like I just backed another one on Kickstarter because I need another Cthulhu tarot deck. Like I need a hole in the head, but it exists, so I must own it. I don't read cards. I just collect them. I just
Okay.
have a shelf and I buy them and put them on there. And if I come up with a cool idea and I have time, I'll make a deck. But like right now, I don't have time. So,
How do you go about making a deck of cards?
well, first you got to decide what kind of deck. So, do you want to do like an affirmation deck? Do you want to do an oracle deck? Do you want to do a tarot deck? Do you want to do a Lenormand deck? So then you have to know how many cards. Then you have to figure out what you want the art to be, and then you either have to draw the art, which I don't do. I find art, and I collage it. So, like my Desert Divination deck is 47 cards, and it took me like a year to do the 47 collages. So you have to decide on your card size and your collages, and because that's a completely invented deck, I had to write the book explaining how to use it, come up with all the spreads for it. Then you have to find a place to print it. You got to get it printed. You got to buy all the cards. Then you got to try to sell it. It's kind of a pain.
Yeah, it sounds like a very involved hobby.
It is.
So
I took like 3 or 4 classes in how to do it.
yeah, it sounds.
It's
It sounds
involved.
like some. It sounds like something that would drive me nuts if I tried to do it. It definitely sounds interesting though, because my wife, she's into tarot and she has a lot of really cool tarot decks, and it's like I look at it and I think the stuff's pretty neat and I like the concept behind it, but it's like there's no way I could ever like develop. I might be able to like write something for it, but I could never just like come up with the images and have the patience to do all that. It must take a lot of.
Well, you're basically like, this is what I'm going to do for the next year. It's like writing a book. Do I like this enough to take a year out of my life to do it?
Yeah, that's true. I feel like the whole writing thing is something I kind of have to do. I feel like if I don't, I go nuts. So it's kind of like the voices forced me to write. And I tried to do something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I get it.
Now you said on your website there was something about you being a healer. What does that
Yeah,
mean?
I don't do that anymore. I took a lot of classes in like Reiki and Shambhala multidimensional healing, which is now called something else, paradigm something. And I learned how to do reflexology and sound healing, but I don't do that anymore.
What made you stop doing that?
Um, Basically, the problem I have with everything I do, and that includes writing and making cards, is if I do the same thing everyone else is doing, nobody's interested because everyone else is doing it. So, oh, Reiki, everyone does Reiki. I don't need to go to you for Reiki because my friend does it, and my cousin does
Mm.
it, and my sister does it. Okay, so I'm going to go learn Shambhala. Oh, I don't know what Shambhala is. I don't want that. I want to go and get Reiki. Okay, so I learned reflexology. Ew, I don't want my toes touched.
Well,
I'm going to
yeah.
do sound healing. I'm going to do sound healing. Oh, I don't know what that is. So it's just, like that's a problem I've had throughout my life. So it's some sort of top-down issue that I have. If I do what everyone else is doing, it's too boring. If I do something different, it's too different and people don't want it. So that happy medium is a hard thing for me. And I just ended up giving up. Because I couldn't train people, because everybody either already knew somebody to train them or they didn't want to learn. I couldn't work on people for the same reason. And I was like, done. And writing appeals to me more.
Right. Yeah, I
So
never even heard, and I'm the same way. Like, I don't want to do what everybody else is doing, and I'm just not a crowd person. I mean, if I genuinely like it, then that'll be different. But I mean, I don't know. If I get an interest in something and everybody else starts doing it, I'll lose interest too. But like, I never heard of Reiki until, I don't know, maybe this last year or so. I didn't even know what it was, and it's like now it seems like I meet people all the time who do it. Like, everybody does it. And I never even knew what it was until I still don't really even know what it is.
I was doing it in the 90s.
Oh, really?
I got my Reiki mastership in 1999.
Oh, wow. So what is it exactly? Is it like
It's
healing of powers of the hands, or?
it's hands-on healing, basically all the different kinds of healing that I know. It's basically you're taking universal life energy, God energy, and you become a straw, a conduit, and you pull the energy through, and it goes into your hand, through your hands and into the person. So you just learn the technique of bringing it through and putting it in the person. I do still use it in the sense that, like, when I sell jewelry and stuff at events, I bless everything that I sell. So I use it for that. But, when like a lady came to me and I was like, "Oh, I'll bless this for you. What do you want to emanate from it when you're wearing it?" And she said, "I just got diagnosed with cancer." So I did like a 1-minute healing on her. But yeah, as far as like standing there with a table and doing like 45-minute sessions, I'm done with that. Just I
I
have
don't
no
even.
interest anymore.
I don't even think I could stand for 45 minutes anymore. So,
I couldn't either. I just got my knees. One of my knees is only a year old, so and then the
oh
other
well.
one's like 6 months old. So yeah, no.
Oh geez. Yeah. Guess you don't want to be doing that anymore.
Yeah.
So
So
I also saw it said that you were an artist. Is that somewhere along the lines? Oh, you said you don't do the art
that's
for
the
tarot. But is
cards. That's the
that the cards?
cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah. So we'll skip
Yeah.
that one. We already talked about that. um, one of the things I found really interesting is the comment about how you like things with shiny gears. Tell us what that
Right.
means.
That's all the steampunk. That's all the steampunk stuff I used to make. That's how I met Jessica and Douglas, the people who are commenting. Um, there used to be a whole bunch of steampunk events in Connecticut, and I used to go to them, and I used to make a ton of really cool like steampunk accessories, like hair clips and necklaces. I make little time machines, and they were really cool. But unfortunately, in the last couple of years, both the people who put on those steampunk events, one stopped doing it, and the other one just moved away. So that's dried up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm still selling them. I'm just selling off what I have already made. Like I sold a bunch of stuff on Sunday at the witches market that I was at. It's a big crossover between pagans and steampunkers, so it'll get sold. But I mean, I still love the aesthetic. I had a store for a little while called Dark Steampunk online where I sold steampunk things that weren't brown. And I thought it would do really well, and it again, too weird. Like when I wore the stuff from my store, everybody be like, "Oh my God, that's so cool." And I give them my card and be like, "Yeah, I have this whole store," but nobody ever bought anything. So after like 8 months, I closed it.
Yeah, that's a problem. A lot of people are like, "Oh, that's really cool," but then they're like, they're not really that interested in it. It's like
Yeah.
they just say it to be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, steampunk was another thing I didn't really know much about until, like, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I guess, and I didn't really know much, and then I started looking at it, and I was like, well, this seems pretty interesting, but I've never really read too many steampunk books. So What would
It's retro futurism. So it's like stuff in the 1890s, but if like the 1890s were kind of futuristic. So if you take like everything made of like steam and gears and so they have like computers and robots and things, but they're still in the 1890s. That's kind of the conceit of it. I don't know, it's just kind of fun.
it sounds very
And you
interesting. I noticed it kind of like it started in a kind of a movement of different kinds of things similar, like different kinds of punk, different
Yep.
eras, which is pretty,
The book Difference Engine by Gibson and the other Sterling, Gibson and Sterling was one of the first steampunk books, and it's a really good it's about the first computer, if it had actually worked. So I've read that book a couple times. It's really fun, and that's like super steampunky, and that like is from the 80s, and that's kind of what one of the early examples of steampunk, although it's not really called that, but that's
right.
the feeling of it.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
the first
Gibson and Sterling.
wasn't like the first computers ever made were like super huge. They were like
Yeah,
like really big, like machines standing in
yeah.
rooms.
You can look up. People have made like computer models if the difference engine had worked, and it's really beautiful. It's like a metal ballet. It's just switches on and off, and they're just kind of like turning, and it's really beautiful. But they never really got one to work the way they wanted. But in this book, it did work. So that's, it's a fun book. If you ever have time to just read for pleasure, The Difference Engine is the name of it.
I've run out of that kind of time. It seems like I started reading. I don't know. It took me. I don't even know how many months to read Pride and Prejudice, and that's not even a long book. So it's kind of like it's. I don't know, but yeah, that would definitely be something I would like to read. So back a little bit back to writing. So you've been at this a little bit, and you've known a lot of different writers. So someone who, what would you get? What kind of advice would you give to like writers who want to get involved in any of these type of communities you've been involved with?
Well, I mean, I would say you want to join a national organization that's for your genre. So, science fiction, horror, romance, mystery, thriller, whatever. So join at the national level, and then you want to find the people in that group who are local, because that's where your support is going to come from. The people at the national level don't care about you. You want to find the people in your state, or if your state is really big, there might be a couple chapters in your state, and then you want to befriend them. And that's where you're going to find people. Facebook groups and Reddit groups, a lot of them are really mean, and they also give really bad advice.
Yeah. The groups.
So that's what I would say is pick whatever national group is closest. If you're in between science fiction and horror, pick one. Don't split yourself and join both. Or, well, I think the fantasy and science fiction is one.
Yeah, they go hand
So
in hand.
yeah, and then get to know the local people in that group. And that's what I did with the HWA, and I've made so many good friends and contacts. And I put together the Horror Over the Handlebars with people that I met there. And and then I belong to another organization that's New England Horror Writers. They're mostly in Massachusetts, but still, that's not, New England is this big, so it's not really
Right.
that far. And
No.
I go up and do events with them. I saw some of them a couple weeks ago, and they're really helpful. They put out anthologies, and my story that was in one of their anthologies was on Ellen Datlow's recommended reading list. 6 stories from that anthology made it on her list, which is amazing. So you know, that's how you get yourself noticed. You piggyback onto groups and you work your way up, because those people in those groups know other people, and then they could say, hey, Bert, this guy I know is putting out an anthology and you should send in a story. And maybe that sub call isn't on any public place,
Right.
and you only know it because they told you,
Right. Like
and that's how you gotta move yourself up. You gotta start with knowing nobody, and then knowing local people, and then knowing, people in your region, and going to events and selling books and signing books, and then walking around and seeing what other writers are there, and picking up their cards and giving them your cards and talking to them. And it's networking, and it's terrible. It's terrible for
it is.
introvert writers.
It's very terrible.
It hurts. You have to go home and go to bed for 2 days, but you
Yes.
got to do it. You have to
Yep.
go. You have to sometimes talk to people in person.
Yeah, and it
After
sucks.
after StokerCon, I got to be at StokerCon from Wednesday to Sunday. I'm probably not going to get out of bed until Tuesday.
Yeah, that stuff wears me out too. Doing events and stuff, but you got to do it. It gets your name out there. And I was
Right.
like, and networking is important. It's important because, like, I remember when I revived Nightmare Press, I was just shocked at how many submissions we got for that submission call. I didn't think we had known. I didn't think I'd known that many people, but apparently the page reached a lot. So because I was always out talking to people, and yeah, it's definitely something you have to do. It's
Yeah,
there's
I mean,
more to writing than just writing. That's yeah.
unfortunately.
And like you said, those Facebook groups, like I remember when I first started doing this on the indie level and doing this in the social, online and stuff. Facebook groups weren't too bad. Like the promotion groups weren't so bad. Like I would get a lot of attention on my books or work from those groups. But after I took time off and came back a few years, it's like those groups are almost dead. It almost doesn't do any good unless it's a group of friends who already all know each other. But
Those groups are
just,
all scammers and spammers now.
that's all they are now. Yeah, it's just people hitting you up. Then like I'm gonna say when I came back to doing this really in like late 2023, early 2024, like when I'd stopped, it was around 2020 or 2021. And it's like they just weren't that prevalent. Like you could post in these groups and people would talk to you like, oh, your book looks really interesting. You could go onto Amazon and you could see, purchases and people following your page after that. But now it's just like somebody coming up at you with some, it sounds like some AI generated comment that's not even legible hardly,
Yep.
trying to sell you marketing. And it's
Yep. And
like,
then they're in your DMs.
yeah.
Oh, do you want to market your book? No, I have a marketer. No. Go
Well,
away.
hello, author. I see that you are an author too. What kind of books do you write? Well, go look my name up if you see
That's
that
what
I'm an
I
author.
say. Or they'll say, I look at your book and something is missing. And I'm like, what book? Well, there's something missing from it. Yes, but which book?
Yeah,
Did you see how many I wrote? So pick one and tell me what's missing from it.
yeah. It's
Just all
sad.
scammers.
The state of the Facebook groups is just gone. And like you said, people give awful advice, and people who haven't even been published too, and like they just, I don't know. It's
I mean, I try to help people on Reddit, but even on Reddit, you give good advice, and then people who don't know anything vote you down.
yeah, because they don't want to
Like,
hear the truth.
I said something and they were like, what do you know? And I was like, I publish anthologies. And they were like, oh, well, no one's ever heard of you. So what could you know about anything?
Most writers no one's ever heard of anyway, even the ones who are making a lot of money. People, we're authors. Nobody hears of us. Unless you're Stephen King or Danielle Steele, nobody knows who you are. I mean, pretty much if you were published past 2010, most people don't know who you are. If you didn't come into this until after 2010, there's a few, but I mean, even the ones who have followings, they're not household names.
No.
If you go up to most people and be like, do you know who Cassandra Clare is? They're going to say no. They're going to, do you know who Jennifer Armentrout is? No, they don't know. They don't know these people, right? So it's like, the only ones who really know are the ones who have big movies made out of their stuff. So Yeah, just people don't get it. They think that if you ain't famous, you don't have any insight, and it's just those people aren't ever going to go anywhere, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still waste my time every once in a while on Reddit, like trying to help people. But yeah, you give like good advice and you get downvoted.
Yeah,
And
I
then
quit.
somebody's like, "Oh, use Chat GPT," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm leaving this discussion. As soon as you tell a writer to use Chat GPT to write their book, I'm out of here."
Yeah. A writer to use chat. Yeah, if you use that, then yeah, I definitely put quotations in front of or around writer on that. So yeah,
I
it's just
asked ChatGPT. It's so bad. I asked a question once, um, when I was writing Metal, because there was a big fight scene inside of a laboratory, and I was like, I don't really know what's in a laboratory. So I asked it what objects inside of a laboratory could be used as weapons, right? I wasn't asking it to write a scene. I was asking it a question, and it said, I don't answer questions about violence. And I said, it's for a book. And it said, write better books. And I said, okay, I'm done with you. That was
yeah,
a huge waste of my time. And I just like killed a forest or something asking those two questions.
yeah.
Like,
I had a
okay,
guy
that
who,
was my first and last trying to get Chat GPT to help me write a book. Like, nope, that was just completely useless. So then I just looked up random. I think I ended up using like a fire extinguisher or something. I don't even remember what I used
yeah.
as a weapon in that scene.
Most people aren't gonna. A lot of people aren't gonna know the difference anyway. But it's kind of like if you're probably like me, you want to get it right. So
Yeah.
you don't want to just half-ass it. So a lot of people will do that. They'll just I don't know. I write such weird stuff anyway. I don't have to be completely accurate because most people are just going to be trying to figure out what the hell I'm writing anyway. So while they're reading it, but yeah. So we're getting down in time. So let's talk
Wow.
about yeah. Let's talk about real quick. What else do you have in the works? And of course, Fat Monster's coming out. But what do we expect for you in the coming days?
Well, I have I sold like I sold a story today, a dinosaur story that's going to be in something called Dinosaur Nightmares, an anthology. Um, I'm working on a nonfiction project that's like a how to write thing that's going to have cards to like a brainstorming tool. And I'm writing a novel with a friend that's going to be a mashup. So if you think of like Pride and Prejudice and zombies, it's something like that, but it's going to involve Shoggoths and deep ones. And
Of
we're
course.
keeping it we're keeping it close to the vest right now. What book we're mashing with it, but we feel pretty good about it.
Cool. Yeah.
Um, and then eventually, I'm going to be writing the sequel to the Mickey Crow stories, which is going to be cyberpunk stories set in the future. And it's going to be paranormal cyberpunk, hunting monsters in the future after there's been a huge plague.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
that all definitely sounds like interesting stuff. That's what thing I've appreciated when I've been looking at what you're interested in, what you do is your work varies, and you don't just stick to one thing, and that's something I can relate to. It's hard to.
Yeah. And tomorrow I start my training to be a certified book coach, in my spare time.
Is that one of the people? Is that the people who try to help authors finish their books?
No, it's when you have a finished book and you make sure that it has everything in it that it needs, so that it reads smoothly and it works as a book and it's cohesive.
So it's not necessarily like editing per se, but
No, it's before editing. So it's basically it's a structural or developmental edit
so it's
more.
like, do you have a beginning? Do you have a middle? Do you have an end? So do you? But
Do you have an inciting incident? Do you have plot points? Do all of your characters come in and leave at the right places? That kind of thing.
so there's an interesting question I have about that. So when coaching someone with that, it seems like a lot of genres have different approaches to writing. So do you have to like sort of be like, all right, this person wrote a literary fiction book. I can't look at their structure the same way I'd look at a genre fiction book.
I'm going to specialize in horror.
Okay, so you stick to a certain genre. Okay, so
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
definitely have to make sure they have the formula down pat, man.
Yeah, it's not so much a formula, really. I don't like the idea of like saying I'm going to make your book adhere to a formula. But I see that people who do book coaching and book doctoring and developmental edits, everybody does like romance and mystery. Nobody does horror. And I feel like but then it could be more of the same where nobody wants it. I don't know, but we'll see. Like I said,
I,
my training starts tomorrow.
I feel like that's something. I'm going to say this without sounding like an asshole. I feel like that's something that the indie horror community needs, or people
I think so, but
telling them that.
will anybody actually take me up on it?
Probably not. That I know I'm going to take that back. I think there will be those who do if you find the right area of the community.
Right.
I've found that that is a vast community, and just it was genre fiction in general, not just horror, but the crossovers, horror, and then you got a lot of dark fantasy, sci-fi. People they all cross over, and I've found, and this is what I looked for with Nightmare Press, a different sort of section where there are people who really want to write their books and put their books out and want to do well and want to improve and want to do and just they care about the writing more, that's kind of like the way I lean. And I think you could find people like that who would be very interested in the feedback. And I think that with the way you approach things, I think you'll be very good at that. I just hope you find your audience or your clientele or whatever.
I hope so too. It's expensive training.
I bet it is. I bet it really is. But I feel like that too. Like I don't know. There. The bad thing is too. There's probably people who try to do that, who actually who try to do what you're doing, and they probably really don't put in the time and effort that you likely have to actually get good at it and do it right. So they probably sour some people. They're like, well, I had this person help me and they did a crap job. But then, you're going to be like, well, I actually try. So I actually put in
Yeah.
the effort. So I think that's really important to do that. So all right, we still got a couple minutes. So if there's anything else you'd like to add, anything you'd like to plug, you've already pretty much talked about everything. But if there's anything I've overlooked that you would like to mention, now's the time to do it.
No, I think we plugged everything. If when you put this up, if you could put my I have a what do you call it? Give me 1 second. I have a link tree. If you could put my link tree when you put the video up
Yeah, that's
with
fine.
all
Well,
my
it's live,
links.
so it's the video's already gone up. But yeah, we can definitely. I can put the link tree in the comments,
Yeah, hold on. I will.
or if you want to go on there, you can put it in the comments if you, when the time comes. I mean, I don't care to do
Oh,
it. I'll do it.
hold on, because it's like making me sign in and everything.
Well, you know what? I'll just do it. I'll do it when I'll do it when we sign off here. We don't want to be complicated. We learn as we go around here.
Yeah. It
All
says
right.
it failed. It says it failed to post. So
Yeah. I'll do it. So when we're done here, so we only got a few seconds left. I want to thank you for coming on, and
thank you for having me.
I think you had some good advice, and I look forward to Fat Monster getting out there.
I look forward to everyone reading it and telling me how much they love it.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you for coming on.
All right. I'll talk to you later.